Hello and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 69, second attempt. Desperately hoping this one works, desperately hoping that some of the people who are busy watching the other video come over to this one. Yeah, sorry, just got a thumbs up from Maggie to say this one's now working. I started the last one and I'm afraid for reasons absolutely unknown to me, Facebook decided not to show me the video and not to show me the comments and not to allow me to comment, and essentially I couldn't figure out a way around it, so I've had to kind of scrap that one and restart the video. So big apologies for all you who started off and saying hi and all the rest of it, but it does mean unfortunately that I missed all your comments. So here we are, finally live on Facebook. Please leave me a comment. Let me know you've got arrived. Let me know where you're from. Let me know you forgive me for all this hassle. Good God, you would have thought 69 episodes in, and I still managed to mess up the beginning almost every single time. You know, I think every time I do this, I think I'm getting one step closer to just saying, right, I'm going to do this on YouTube. At some point, I think I'm just going to move across and do it on YouTube. Facebook just keeps changing things, keeps freaking me out. Right, I'm going to have to stop now because I'm going to get onto a rant, which isn't going to do anybody any good. You tuned in for photography, not photographers ranting about Facebook. And I'll have to edit all this lot out for the YouTube version. So yes, here we are, live, Facebook. Let me know you're here. Paul says, looks fine now. And Sandra says, I can see and hear Kim now. That's good. This is being recorded. If anything ever messes up, you can't find it, you lose it halfway through, you can always find old episodes or past episodes on youtube.com/Kim Ayres, where they do get recorded and put each week. And also on a Wednesday morning, just to remind you, for anybody who doesn't know, I also tend to write a blog post, so that when I embed the thing into YouTube, I then embed it, when I upload the video to YouTube, I then embed it into the blog. So if you're ever interested in my blog, kimayres.blogspot.com is the place to go for that. Right, okay, so we are on the Rhodes Photo Challenge tonight. So last week, I spent a bit of time chatting about the notion of roads in photography and how roads, as well as being a really interesting compositional technique to lead you into a photo, a road, if you see a road, you want to look along the road, you want to see where it's going to take you, what's at the end of the road, what's around the corner of the road, what are the conditions of the road like, what's by the side of the road. And all this is to do with the idea of journey, of travel, of adventure, of experience, of change of time and place. Implicit in any road is the fact that the moment you step onto it, it is taking you somewhere, or it is bringing you back home again. You will travel, time will pass, you will have experiences, you will change because of those experiences. Maybe the change is purely you now have a pint of milk in your hand for your cup of tea when you get home. Or maybe the change is you walk the dog is now satisfied and happy to settle down. Maybe you've been for a drive, maybe you've been for a cycle. There's huge amounts of potential in road for story, for narrative. And in photography, this is really important. One of the things those of you who've been watching for quite a while will know is that I'm very strong, talk very strongly about the notion of storytelling and narrative in photography. What is a photo other than a kind of short story? You look at it and it takes you to it explores ideas and places and thoughts and concepts and all sorts of things. And it's a communication. So with that in mind, I then set a challenge. After talking about all that last week, I set a challenge, and we've got about I think it's about 12.5 or so people sent in images. Some have sent in final completed images, some have sent in images where they kind of feel they're onto something but they're not entirely sure and would like a bit of feedback. So there's going to be quite a bit of talking about the photos tonight. I'll go through them one by one and pause to check comments and see how we go. What we've got, Russ says, apologies for not submitting to the challenge this week. I fully intended to, but another mad weekend of motocross photography got in the way again. It's a shame, Russ, because motocross is all on very rough roads, but roads nonetheless. Oh, VG's just cropped up to say good evening as well. Cool, great. So we have people here. I'm hoping there's nobody been left on the false start video earlier. And right, okay, so what we're going to do then, let's just make a start. Let's dive in and find a photo. And the first photo I'm going to start with is Angela. So Angela sent in this photo and said, for the road challenge. This was taken in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. We were on our way to see the childhood home of Loretta Lynn. And for anybody who doesn't know Loretta Lynn, she's like a singer, songwriter, country star who's just like stratospherically famous, world-known kind of star. And interestingly, what we have here then, so photos obviously been taken in the autumn or fall, as it would be in North America, and we've got a road twisting off to the left there, and painted onto a stone here, Butcher Holler, which was one of her more well-known famous songs as well. So that idea then that the road is taking you off to go and see, the childhood home of a famous singer that you'd love to find out more about. So there's story in this. I mean, if you don't know Loretta Lynn, you don't know Butcher Holler, you're maybe not sure quite what that is about. But the fact that Butcher Holler also has some little musical notes around it maybe starts to give you a clue, and it's the kind of thing which you could always Google and find out. Photographically, it's kind of interesting. You've got the arrow pointing you here. The road sort of steers off to the left, and the road itself is all kind of falling off. The real bit that grabs your attention, I think you're part of the problem here is your eye gets drawn off to the left because you automatically want to look along the road, but then you've got this sign here written on the rock which is also grabbing your attention. I kind of can't help but feel this would work because that road is just so much on the side, Angela, that I think it would probably work better if it was just a little bit wider. I think rather than having a kind of square crop with this road. Now I'll just show you what I mean roughly. I'm going to use content aware fill just to give a sense. This won't properly replicate what would have been had you taken the photo, but it will give us an idea. And I think if we stretch that across so that essentially we're going more a kind of, an extra third of the photo, and maybe we can even pull this up a little bit, make it much more of a kind of a landscape photo, something like that. Now let's just see how that fills in. And now, okay, it obviously hasn't liked this bit. It's sort of no, I was wanting to do that. I wanted to go to the patch tool, so I will just briefly drag the patch down here just to kind of give us a sense of if there was a bit more tree over on the left. So that gives you an idea of what this might have looked like had you actually just. And then it becomes a kind of a photo of two halves, but the two halves do work together. You've got a nice line coming up from the bottom left-hand corner, and it draws you in, and before you go too far over to the right, you've got this stone here, which then points you back in again. And I think actually, if you were doing something like this, a little bit of an adding a vignette, which is where you can darken or lighten with vignette. If I go to optics here, you can lighten a vignette, but I'm not really wanting it. I want to darken it just slightly, not too much, but just enough here, subtly. And then what that does is that kind of helps create a little barrier around the edges and draw your attention back into the photo. Because if you've got too much stuff taking you out of the photo, you're losing your audience, you're losing your story. Always with your photo, you're looking for ways to kind of contain it, to bring people back into the image. Well, there are exceptions to that, but mostly it's quite a good rule of thumb. So that's the kind of thought I had with that. Great idea for a story, but I think, a slightly better crop and, way of taking the photo might have made that just a little bit more interesting. But thanks very much for sending that one in, Angela. I hope you find that feedback a bit useful. Right, okay. So, What have we got here? Oh, we've got a few more comments here. Nuria saying, hi everyone, I'm glad you could make it. April says, hello everyone, hope all is well. That's great. Russ says, I think if the photo is more landscape than square crop, bringing the road more into the centre would be an improvement. Right, okay, so it looks like Russ probably commented just a few seconds before I actually started doing exactly that. So great minds think alike, in this case at any rate. Viji says, yes, the landscape looks good. Angela says, thank you. Oh yes, and Russ has said, sorry Kim, I started typing my comment, but you beat me to it. Right, cool. Okay, so let's move on then. Let's go to the next one I'm going to talk about is April. So just as well you turned up then, April. We got here just in time. So April says, I took this picture of my brother's car in front of me. I thought it looked cool. We're on our way to do some fall sighting. Sightseeing in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire, I think, is up in that sort of right corner of the USA. It was kind of New England, I think, and it's sort of well known for its incredible autumn colours. And you just similar to Canada in that sense, where you just get the massive sea of reds and incredible colours. And I desperately want to get over there at some one year, I think, to see it directly for myself. So she said, I loved how the road looked with the scenery. Now, what I would say with this, April, is first of all, yes, great. You get that sense, you're here, you're on the road, there's other traffic. It has that little bit more attachment for you because the car directly in front is your brother's car. So that's creating an extra bit of story. You're following him into the New Hampshire mountains. I'm not quite sure. Are the colours actually that vivid? It feels like the camera the saturation is just slightly overdone. And I don't know whether sometimes the camera settings, auto camera settings, don't quite know how to cope with fairly vivid colours and will sometimes oversaturate some of them. And I almost just want to sort of knock down the vibrance just a little bit on this. The other thing I would say is, really, I kind of feel with this, what we have is we have the road and the road takes us off and then we sort of disappear, just sort of, so we've only got this bottom third is really, is where the road is. We've got these wonderful trees up here. But if you are talking about going into the mountains and you are talking about all these incredible trees and colours, I think what you really wanted to have was more of a zigzag. I think you wanted to have a line which led you in and then led you back again. Or really to have more over on the right here. If your road had sort of gone further to the left and then turned deeper into the photo before it kind of came round. And so you got actually more on the right side of the picture, more trees, more colour. I think then it would have felt like the road going through the scenery much more, whereas this can almost be the road on the edge of the scenery. There's a bit of a boundary, and I think given that where you were going and what you were going to see, I'd be very, very surprised if there wasn't a nicer place along that road where you could have had more of a kind of leading into it. In the end, the notion of the road challenge was to try and get the road to take you into the story. And whilst we can see glorious colours here, I think you really want to have that sense of mountains and forests and colour. And for that, you kind of want to have it almost so it's either side of the road. So the road is much more drawing you into it rather than just starting to take you and then falling out before you've really got much of a chance to go anywhere with it. But great story, yeah, and I love that idea. We all know that we all get kind of excited by that idea of sort of heading off on holiday or on a trip somewhere, and if you've got family members as well in the car in front, a little bit of a kind of mini convoy, it's a lot of fun. But if you take on board some of those ideas with that idea of taking a road to really draw you into the photo rather than kind of be careful of the road pulling you out of it a little bit too early, and that's kind of what it feels a little bit like that. But I hope you find that useful, April. Right. Right, okay, so April says, yes, has the largest mountain in the northeast, Mount Washington. Okay, and April says she did add colour. Yeah, and I think you probably really didn't need to. I mean, the thing about, I mean, it was taken in the sunshine already, and the thing about those colours is those colours really are powerful anyway. And by pushing the colour a bit more, it kind of overcooks it that little bit more. I mean, what it means is when I looked at it, the first thing I noticed was the colours didn't quite seem right, which also drew me away from what you're trying to tell me. The story is driving into the hills. But if I'm looking at the editing that you've done to it, I'm no longer really as involved in the story of it. So, worth nudging back a little bit. Okay. Okay. Right, April says, thanks, Kim. I will. But the covers are almost this vivid. Yeah, well, that's it. If they almost are, you don't really quite need to nudge that a little bit further. I think it's perfectly good enough as to go for as much of the natural colour as you can. Cool. Okay, next then, what I want to do is let's go to Fiji. Right, okay, so Fiji. Now, Fiji says this was for the road challenge. The real challenge was trying to get the picture in the picture. The alignment was a bit tough. I have to say, I love this idea. I think it's a great idea to have a photo within a photo. And the idea then that you've got the photo with the camera, with your phone camera, and then you're using another camera to take it and get the picture and get the echo of the picture around the picture, I think is a lot of fun. It's a great idea. Very difficult to pull off something like this effectively. What I do like here is the things I like best about this are that you have taken the time to line up the double yellow lines that are in the middle of this with double yellow lines underneath. So they just about line up on there. What I also like is the fact that we can see this this couple on the motorbike here. We can see the couple on the motorbike here. So we can see that picture, and then we've actually got the echo. This is real time live as we're seeing it. So we've got the camera there. So photo within a photo. The tricky thing with this is what you have. If you're doing this, you've essentially got 3 photos in one. You've got the photo that's actually on the phone. You've got the photo that is surrounding the phone, and you've got the photo which is the phone and the photo surrounding it. And you somehow have to make all these 3 work together. Every single part of that photo has to work as a photo. And I think with this one, I think it's partly, I think the overall thing kind of works. You've got the camera in the space. That's good. You've got it off center so that we've got this bike on the right. I think that compositionally works really well. You've got the line lining up with the double yellow lines. That works really well. You've got the story, which is the hand holding the phone. That works really well. My only thought with the photo what's actually in the camera, if you could have tilted it forward a little bit. We don't need as much sky here. The photo behind the phone, you've got quite a nice kind of rule of thirds division. The horizon line is 2/3 of the way up. Whereas here, in the actual phone, it's just sort of slightly below center, and you've got a lot of sky you don't actually need. And if you just tilted that camera forward, just a fraction, so the top part was moving away from you, so you'd have got more road in. You could have still had it lined up quite easily with the double yellow lines. Less sky in that top part, so that was also a kind of, only about 1/3 of it was taken up with the sky. I think then that would have been just about perfect. And then in editing, if you were going to edit it, you could maybe do a little bit of vignette, or just sort of slightly darken down the sky in the background so it starts to match. It doesn't have to be exact, but it starts to match the colour, because the colours are much darker and richer in the phone, and sort of a bit more pale and blown out in the surrounds. So if you could darken that sky so it matches a little bit more in with that one, and then tilt it forward. But I think you've done amazingly well here. I think smug points, allow yourself some smug points for this one, Fiji. It's a great idea, and a lot's gone into it. So what I'm really talking about is the kind of nitpicking thing. it is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do that like I say, to get all three pictures together, essentially lining up in the one. So well done, VG. Nice idea. I hope that's give. I would suggest to some other, to anybody else who's watching, if you get a chance, try something similar yourself. Be inspired by these ideas, and go out and try them. Right. Okay. Where am I at? Okay, we've got Vandana, April, and Inga, and Nuria and Sandra, and Russ, all saying what a great idea it is, VG, and they all like the shot. And there's thanks from VG to me and to everyone else. Cool. Okay, excellent. Right, next what we're going to do then is we're going to move on to Brian. Now, Brian says, I took this a while ago travelling on the A9, and the A9 in Scotland it sort of runs up through, not quite the middle, but it's almost there. It runs from Perth up to Inverness, and is a incredible road. It's a really long road, for it's 100 miles or so of road, which I know compared to some places like in America and India is barely anything. But within a small island like the UK, given that it isn't motorway, there are chunks of dual carriageway, but it does feel like quite a drive to go up. But it's also through a beautiful part of the country, and lots of different landscapes and lots of dramatic mountains and passes and everything else. So it's a lovely part of the country. So Brian says, took this while travelling on the A9, snow on the hills in mid-April, wasn't this year. Just wondering what's round the next bend. This was on one of the many dual carriageway sections. Now, I have to say, Brian, my first thought with this is, again, a little bit like April's photo. I tend to feel there's probably better places on the road. That I know I've driven this road many times, and there are so many places where the road weaves, where you go through passes, where you come over a ridge and then there's a dramatic scene before you, that this itself doesn't feel like, if you're going to take a photo of a road, I think there's other places where you could create so much more, just, round the corner, a little bit further back on this bit here. And I think part of what's failing you here is the way the lines are leading you, or rather almost not leading you. There's a lot of really strong lines. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's open this in Photoshop. And I'll overlay, let's just close Angela's there. And let me overlay a little thing here, and let's get the pencil tool and show you what I mean. So you've got a really strong diagonal running up there. Got a strong diagonal running down here. We've got a really strong horizontal there and there. We've got strong vertical coming from there. And then you've got the diagonal running up the road here, which sort of, and then you've got that coming in there. And part of the problem is that it's kind of a bit all over the place. There isn't like a proper focal point. When you've got the road, you want to run along the road. Let's just pull this back out again so people can see that we've got the curve of the road there, which I've just suddenly realised was getting a little bit hidden behind me. But the place where really, the strong diagonal here, the strong diagonal there, and for that matter, actually, there's even a horizontal here with the road. Everything kind of drawing to this point in your photo. And the problem is with this point is there's nothing there. That's not, so the diagonal, everything's drawing us to here, but it isn't delivering. So our eye either gets drawn there, or it follows us up round the road and then just sort of disappears. And there's all the rest of this here, but this hasn't really gone anywhere. So you've got a little corner of the road, and if anything, it takes us back up to here, to this point, which isn't delivering. So I think really that's one of the things you've kind of got to be careful of here, Brian, is it's the leading lines are really what this is all about. A lot of the stuff in composition with roads, the leading lines are pretty much everything, or not everything, but the most dominant thing, the most dominant part of a road picture. If the road is what it is about, as opposed to it just happens to be it's a photo that just happens to have a road in. This was called the road challenge, not landscape, and maybe you can have a bit of road. Then you are either using the road as this is the story, or you're using the road to take you into the story. But the road is then a leading line, and where's it leading you to? And in this case, it's not just the road, but like I say, all the other bits are leading you to this point, which isn't really delivering then. So I hope that gives you a little bit of ideas. I can't believe that this would have been the only point on the A9 you would have taken the photo. So I would suggest maybe go back and look through some of your other photos from the same trip to see if you can find something which has got a real sense of the line leading you through. And I think you'll probably find that it is you can deliver a much more satisfying photo from something like that. So I hope that gives you some insights, Brian, and some thoughts about what you can do with the roads. Okay, what have we got here? Oh, Maggie was saying, glad I was handing out the smug points to VG. Oh, Robert's here. Howdy all from Texas. Sorry, I'm late. You're okay, Robert. Not done your one yet. Bandana says, hi, Robert. Okay. Oh, Stacey saying coal miner's daughter. I think that's a Loretta Lynn reference. I don't know whether you're running behind or whether you're in answering somebody else's comment there, Stacey. Right. Okay, so where are we? In fact, Robert, right on time. Here we go. We're going to talk about your one next. So, Robert has sent me a picture of his car. Says here, also, here is my entry for the road challenge. I took this picture in spring. It is a country road in East Texas and has a rare full canopy covering the road. This is not typical in the area. I mean, I must admit, if you said this been taken in Scotland or in the UK somewhere, I'd have been quite. It's not what I tend to think of as Texas, that's for sure. So this is not typical in the area. I plan to take more photos in the fall and perhaps winter here. Let me know if you have any suggestions on improving the photo. Okay, so now in this case, what we have is we've got the road drawing us straight down into the picture to the gap. So we've got this fantastic canopy and it takes us down to here. Further back up the road, we've got the car. Now, the other thing I noticed when I come in here is it's incredibly noisy, Robert, and which surprises me because although it will be slightly dark under the trees, I didn't think it would be as dark as to have that amount of noise. Now, Robert did also send me the original. So this is the original. So part of that noise has come through the editing. And again, there's a sense, once you see the original here and then you look in here, there's a sort of sense that maybe those colours have just been ramped up just a little bit too much. A little bit of overcooking there. I like the crop. I think that's a much better crop than the original. You're right to get rid of that whole chunk of road in the front, which isn't really doing anything. Now, your ISO settings, because you sent me the original, I was able to get hold of that, and it's basically, yes, the problem is you've got ISO of 5,000. 5,000 is a very high ISO, and then you're battling with it before you've even edited it. You're battling with that amount of quality loss. The higher the ISO, the better. A lot more light you get in, but you lose quality. It's a sort of degradation of the quality of the image. A low ISO, like a 100 or 200, is preserving as much of the detail as you're going to get through hitting the sensor. But you're not letting as much light in. So you're constantly trying to find this balance between and to balance out your ISO, you're using your wide aperture or narrow aperture, shutter speed, and what have you. Now, according to this, your exposure time was 1/60th of a second, but your f-stop was f22, and f22 is a very, very narrow aperture. Now, I can understand why you wanted to have a fairly narrow aperture, and that's because what you've done here is you're wanting to get the car in focus and you're wanting to get the road in the distance in focus as well. You're not wanting it to all blur out. But to be honest, I think an F16 would certainly have done the job. An F11 would probably have got away with it, possibly even an F8. I think if your F8 was focused on the car, whilst it would have got a little bit out of focus by the end of the thing, if you're standing back a bit, I don't think that you would have had too much of a problem with this. Added to that, this is a fairly wide angle lens. I think it's 24 millimeters, it says there, which is going to give you more depth of focus as well. Now, if you'd taken your shutter, your aperture down to something like about f11 or even f8, I think then you could have decreased your ISO down to something like 2000, maybe even 1000, which is then kind of, with the kind of camera you've got and a little bit of software manipulation, would have made a lot more difference, and you wouldn't have ended up being anything like as noisy. So that's the technical bit. Now, compositionally, I think the problem that we have here is, whilst on the surface we go, great road, car parked in the road, we've got a kind of a conflict, we've got a slight imbalance of what we're trying to do, because the road, just like I've been talking earlier in earlier ones, grabs our attention, and our eyes can't help but follow to the end of the road, and the end of the road is the gap, is, as we come out of the canopy. But your other key subject is the car, and the car is over here slightly in the shade. Some quite nice reflections on it. But now, if this was your picture, now I would then say lighten it up a little bit, bring out a little bit more detail, but that's a picture in itself, which is a picture of the car with the trees and the reflections on the trees. But this isn't a picture of the car, this is a picture of the road. And I think part of the real problem here in the composition is essentially the car is facing the wrong way for this composition. Because what happens with the car, we follow the direction the car is pointing in. And it's an interesting thing that if you, generally speaking, when you're looking at a picture, if somebody's looking off to the side, you automatically want to look in the direction that they're looking in. If somebody is pointing, you automatically want to follow the line of the finger. If someone is cycling, if someone is driving, you look ahead. These things are like arrows, whether it's a finger, a car, a bike, eyes, a nose, they're like an arrow saying, look this way. And as such, this car is saying, look this way. And it's forcing us to look down to the bottom left corner of the picture, because we want to follow but with the road is taking us way off over here. So that's where the road's taking us, but the car is taking us down here, which isn't really giving. So we've got the eye isn't totally sure where to look. And as such, because you've got that conflict, that's creating an imbalance in the photo. Now, two ways around this. One is actually if the car was pointing the other way. If we saw the back of the car and we could see the length of the car pointing this way, then that would be like acting like a second arrow pointing in that direction, and we would just shoot down that where the road is taking us. The question then is there anything to deliver at the end of this? Now, another option, that takes us to the other option then, which is to essentially have the car here, park it just into the gap, or to have a car that's driving round. But if you've got something down here, if you were wanting to actually draw attention to the car, you place it here, because the road is then acting as a leading line taking you to the car, whereas here is taking you past the car and the car's taking you past the road. So I hope that makes sense. If you just think about the composition, the fact that the road is trying to draw your eye in one direction and the car is trying to draw your eye in the other direction, means that we're kind of struggling to make the most of this, and therefore the image isn't as strong as it maybe could have been. But it's obviously clearly a lovely place, and definitely worth going back there in the fall, go back there in the winter, go back there under other weather conditions as well. Maybe where you've got a bit more bright. Looks like it's been the roads maybe a bit damp, a little bit overcast, but you've got some really nice bright sunshine coming through there, or even a little bit of mist. Do you get much mist down in Texas? No idea. Maybe it's too warm for it. But something like that could be really quite amazing. So thank you for sending that one in, Robert, and I hope that gives you a few thoughts and ideas. Okay, what have we got here? A few more comments. April likes the canopy. Vandana says, what a beautiful road. VG says, canopy, we have roads with such grand canopies as well, such a refreshing sight. Well then, VG, you know where you need to go, head out with a camera. What else have we got? April says, would have enjoyed seeing them. Oh, Michelle really liked the canopy of trees. Jackie says, we call them kissing trees. Ah, okay, right. Maggie says, magical stretches of road when the trees grow over like this. Inga likes the composition, the road, the lines pull you in, even if it's a nice car. I would have done one without to concentrate on the road and lines. So there's that sense of, yeah, the road is a composition and the car is a separate composition because it's not working with it. Right, okay, so hopefully, Robert, that's giving you some ideas and things to play around with. Right, next up then, we're going to Graham's photo. And here, actually, think about it, we're into almost identical territory as Robert's one. So what we have here, now, let's go, where are we? Graham says, sorry for the late entry, this is an old railway cutting on the Primrose Line in Devon. The railway track beds are known as the Road, as in railroad. This one was closed in 1963 under the Beeching cuts. That was, I think, Lord Beeching back in the early 1960s. Absolutely devastated the whole rail industry in the UK. Just figured that the future was in roads and got rid of a whole bunch of railways, blew up the bridges so that they couldn't be reinstated. Has since in some ways been seen as major vandalism, and you know, then when you consider the amount of money they're now spending to kind of create new railways, then, you know, anyway, put the politics aside. Some of these old rail things have actually been turned into wonderful footpaths and walks and cycling paths and what have you. And this one is clearly one of those. And Graham says, now is part of, in this case, it's part of a nature walk, although I often wish I could have ridden the line in its heyday from Brent to Kingsbridge. And I'm sure it would have been beautiful. So in this case, as well as the trees, we've got the embankments coming up. And like Robert's Road, we've got the green, we've got the canopy, and we've got this, it's drawing us into the picture. And this is where we end up. Not only is the road, the path drawing us here, but we have the diagonal lines coming down from the embankment also. And, you know, so we've got a triangle to the left pointing to the end of this. We've got a triangle on the right pointing to the end of this. And then we have a dog. And so here we can see that this is basically pretty much a repeat of the same compositional difficulty that we had with Robert in the last photo. That the dog is, well, you see a dog, you get drawn to the attention of the dog. The dog is one photo. The path and where it leads you is another photo. And if you want to combine the both of them, really, you either need to have the dog heading the other way, so like the dog is running ahead of you as you're walking down the path, or you have the dog or something else, a cyclist or anything else, sort of down here towards the end of the path, and that's where you have your second subject or your main subject, so that the path and the subject on the path are complementing each other rather than working against each other. And this is with this one, I do tend to feel that, you know, you're here. Yeah, I mean, of course, you could pick up the story. You can say you've been along the path, you've turned around, the dog's catching you up. But you have to work out the story. It's not sliding you into it. There's that little bit of conflict first. So I hope that helps, Graham. Hope that gives you a few ideas of what to do when playing around with composition. Right. Oh, Pat's written, thanks for explaining the confusion twixt car and view. I felt it but couldn't put it into words. Excellent. Well, I dare say probably by now you'll have seen the same with the dog on Graham's as well. Oh, and Van Dan has already put poor dog going the wrong way. Yes, yes. I mean, I think that's really the point, Pat, is that it's what Robert did with the car, what Graham's done with the dog, is absolutely understandable and perfectly natural. And because you're not thinking about it, it's only. But if you are studying composition and you are studying leading lines, and you get used to the idea of, for everybody watching this, you understand the notion of a leading line, a line which is drawing your attention to a particular place in the photo, right? And we can use that, and we should use that. And if you're wanting to improve your photography, you learn this is one of your major tools in the toolbox. There is a point last year where I did a whole section on leading lines. Maybe I should do another one, because I think probably there's very few of you who now watch this who are hanging around. I think would have been within the first dozen or so episodes. So yeah, I'll maybe do something on leading lines again at some point in the not too distant future. Yeah, so but you need to use the leading lines to enhance your story and not to be battling against it. Right, okay, so next up then we're going to go to Inda, and Inda's new to our group, and she put this one in and said, I took this image while waiting for my husband to come home. That's beside a toll road. My son is playing around, jumping from here to there. He looks so happy. Just a simple place and time, but can still bring happiness. Okay, so what we have here then is we've got, I think so, this is beside a toll road, and Inda's boy is playing about while waiting for daddy to come home. So that's the story, nice little story. Now, what I would say though is with this is that if we're talking about the theme being the road challenge, we're not really seeing much of the road. In essence, the real story here, we don't tend to think of as the road, we tend to think of as your son. As soon as we've got a human in the picture, that's the first thing we will look at. We will look at the human before we will look at the car, before we will look at a dog, generally speaking. We'll notice, so our brains are primed to see humans first. Children will zoom in on the child. So that then becomes what the story is about. The road, we can almost not see the road. We can see some signs, absolutely, but the road itself is barely a mark on here. So what it feels with this then is that the road is incidental to the picture rather than the focus of the picture. I mean, what is also quite clear here is that you are, I guess you must be squatting down, almost lying down. The little bits of grasses are quite in front of you. We're looking up at your child. So you're very low down, which is also meaning that even though the grass isn't very long, it's kind of hiding the road. If you were to take this from standing up, you would get your son in, and you would also get the road in the background. However, having said that, we would then probably have run into the same kind of problems that we had with both Graham and Robert as well, is that the road would take us away further into the picture, whereas your son would be drawing our attention off to one side. So I think it's about understanding what your photo is about. What's the story? What's the prime narrative of your photo? And once you understand that the story is really about your son, then you chop and change your composition, the lines, the light, and everything else in order to enhance the story of your son playing on that little bit of the base of the lamp, the lighting, the lamp post. And it's about your son first and the environment second. If the story is about the road, which if you're given something called the road challenge is what it's primarily supposed to be about, then in essence your son becomes a distraction unless your son is further down and you're using the road to draw the eye specifically towards him. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a few insights into ideas of how you can play with the photo, or that kind of doing that kind of photography. So thank you very much for sending that one in, Inda. Right, okay. Next up then, we are going to go from Inter to Inga. So Inga sent in, let's say, this photo, which is rather dramatic. She says, I started to prepare a recent photo for the road challenge, but there is a photo from 3 years back that always comes back to me. This is from the volcano from Etna in Sicily. Just black and gold soil against the mountains behind. The vehicles heading upwards, swirled in the dust, seem to come from another time, another civilization. And I have to say, Inga, I love the S-bend in this. I love the dust coming up from behind. It does feel, although we've got trucks which are obviously very modern, the blackness of the volcanic ash, the way the dust is flying up does feel quite primal in a way. And then interestingly, when we go over the ridge, we've got mountains and what probably built up areas in the distance. It's kind of a little bit difficult to tell. Now, because I wasn't quite so sure what was going on in the background, I then did ask Inga if she would send me in the original photo, which she sent me here, and then said actually, once she sort of pulled it out and looked at it, she actually kind of preferred the original to the one she put into Facebook. And I can see why. I think I prefer this as well. Because now what we can see is we can see past the mountains, we can actually see sea in the distance as well, which creates yet another layer and level as well. I think, first of all, obviously our eye gets drawn to the line, this strong white line, and the vehicles on it. But I do love that S. I do love that S bend. And so unusually with this, I mean, normally I would say you would expect to have a road that draws your eye into the distance. But for some reason, this one I think works because it's coming across and we've got the vehicles which are drawing our eye through. But then we kind of look up above and there's all this landscape. And so this landscape behind is really giving us a sense of the hill, the mountain, the volcano that we're driving up the side of. However, one of the other things that I noticed is down here in the bottom left corner, it looks like there's the edge of some kind of building, which looks quite interesting. Also, is that a person? Looks like a person walking along as well. And this little edge of building here, I desperately wish you'd actually included a bit more of it. And because you maybe don't need quite as much on the right of the photo, but this little building in the bottom left might have been interesting, I think it's one of those where had you just nudged your whole viewpoint to your left, just a fraction, you could have just cut off a little bit of this on the right and just include it, and the equivalent amount added onto the left would have included this building. And I think that could have just added a nice little extra to it. But that aside, well, I like I said, I think I definitely prefer this version to your original crop, which actually feels a bit too. Now, I think if you were going to crop in like this, you'd almost be better off cropping further in like that, or just, maybe so we've just got a little edge there, because this is kind of, then the story is here. The story is contained within this part. You've allowed some of this extra to come into the back, but I don't feel enough, which is why then this works better, because then we've got layers, 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 layers. And I think there's much more in that. So I hope that gives you a little bit of feedback to play with on that one. Right. Okay, where are we? Vandana says, are we going alphabetically? Well, apart from the fact that sort of ish, but not quite, because Robert came in before Graham and VG came in after April, I think. So not completely, and I think there's another hiccup somewhere along the line. But if you're trying to work out, do you have time to go and make a cup of coffee before I get to yours? Probably. Yeah. Okay, where are we? Maggie says, love the tonal shapes of grey. Vandana says, I love the drama in this one by Inga. Sandra also says, very dramatic photo. Russ also likes the great dramatic shot with an interesting narrative. And April also likes the smoke and the dust coming up from the trucks. Absolutely. I think that's really the thing about that photo, is that sense of drama that's going on, and which is emphasised by the dust that's flying out. So I think smug points to you, Inga. Definite smug points for that one. Interesting, good photo. Cool. Right. Oh no, got more comments here. VG says amazingly captured. Oh, Stacey says likes the canopy of the trees, which can only make me think, given the fact she was talking about Loretta Lane a little bit earlier, is that Stacey has joined a bit later and started from the beginning and is running and commenting about 15 minutes behind the rest of us. Okay, Inga says, great, thanks a lot. Actually, I had another one with the hut, but too centered in the wrong position against the vehicles. Yeah, I can understand. You're trying to... It's a difficult one. There's the photos where this is the best I could get under the circumstances. That's one thing. And then there's the photos which is, this is the best photo that I could possibly get. The problem is when you put your photos out there, nobody else knows. It doesn't matter how difficult it was to get the photo you got. If you didn't quite pull it off, it doesn't deliver. In the end, most people looking at the photo are only going, does the photo work, doesn't it? If there's an interesting story, if there were amazing challenges you had to overcome to get the photo, these are stories which are in addition to the photo. You write the blog post to go along with that. You tell people about it. But you can't... but in the end, the photo, if you're trying to get the best photo that you're putting in for a competition or something like that, then however good the excuse, however good the reason for not getting the photo, doesn't cut it with anybody judging it. That sounds like a horrible truth. Anyway, but I still thought there was plenty of drama in it. I did enjoy it. Right. Okay, and where are we? Sorry, people are replying to other people, and that's kind of confusing here. Bandana says, well done to Inga for smug points. And lovely capture. Michelle also says she loves the dust from the trucks, giving it a sense of speed, which it absolutely does. Cool. Right, okay, so from Inga we're going to go to Jim. Now, Jim's got an interesting one here. It says, hi Kim, this is my image for the road challenge, and it was taken in Spain. It's an unusual roundabout with a car placed in the centre. Zoom in for those of you on small screens. There's a car sitting in the middle of a roundabout with a false road, an avenue with trees. Quite strange. Quite fun. I particularly like the Maple Leaf roads, he says, leading up to the centre of the roundabout. Not sure if I should have cropped it in a bit, as I was in two minds that if I lose the impact of the whole road layout. Apologies for the clarity, as I only had JPEG to work with. Okay, Jim, so I can absolutely understand why you grabbed this photo. I must admit, when I first saw it, I kind of thought, oh, that's tilted, that I want to kind of straighten that horizon. And then I realised, no, this is because this here, I just kind of want to flatten that out. But then I realised, actually, no, you've got it perfectly straight, because all these verticals of the building and the sign and everything else are sitting vertical. And if I tilted that, all these would suddenly sit at an angle. So it is a little bit strange that you've got, you know... now, I think it looks like one of these chance shots. You grab the shot. You've come up to the roundabout. If we look down at the base here, we can see you are in the road. So presumably you haven't leapt out of your car and stood and moved to a better position to get the photo. You've just grabbed it while you could out of the car window. And whilst it then, fine, you've grabbed it because it's an interesting thing. There you have that car and that. It's an interesting roundabout. There's no doubt about that. If you are trying to talk about the idea of creating a compositionally more interesting photo, I think there's one or two things that are working against you. The first thing that's really working against you is this guy on the bike here, disappearing. First of all, he's cropped. So you're missing the front of the wheel. So it really feels like it's just gone straight through the middle of him, which doesn't look quite right. And the fact that he's disappearing out the way, which when we think about everything I've just been talking about what I was saying with Robert particularly, and also with Graham, about the fact that we tend to follow the line of a car or a bike, this is leading us out of the picture rather than back into it. So there is a kind of feeling with this that actually if you cropped that bit out, it might make all the difference. Just close that one of Brian's. So if we just removed the bike there and then probably just the edge of that building, and then we could bring this up a little bit. So we've still got that little corner there if you wanted it, and we could bring that down, but not so much that we lose the sign there. And then automatically, see, I think that creates a slightly better crop. We're now a bit more up into the rule of thirds with the car. We've got the line is coming from the diagonal. The false road is running the diagonal down here. The only real problem we've got left is, because it's not a bright red or something like that, the car is almost camouflaged. There's trees running behind it. There's a tree over here. It's green. It's not quite... You just want to kind of be round to your left a little bit more and have it sitting more clearly between the buildings so that the car itself stands out. Or if the car itself was red. I mean, if we... Let's just briefly select that car. Actually, I'll just have to unselect. Yeah, something like that, roughly. And then let's go to hue saturation, and let's take it. It's gone purple. Can we make it redder? Boost the saturation, something like that. It's not going to be perfect, but just to show you how much of a difference it makes. Now do you see that within that composition, the red, you know, it's fine being red because it stands out against everything else. But because it wasn't red, because it was green, it kind of gets lost a bit. So your choices here are you move and try and you understand that your key point, which is this car on that roundabout, is the background is getting in the way, so you need to make adjustments to it. Or maybe you play in Photoshop. Perhaps the designers of the roundabout weren't thinking of people who are going to sort of take photos out their windows, but they should have been, shouldn't they? Okay, so I hope that gives you some ideas, Jim. Thanks for sending that in. I love that. I do love it when I go to places and they've made a feature of the roundabouts. There's one or two up round Falkirk and Stirling, I think. And it's in Falkirk, I think, where you've got like an island with an old boat on it, you know, and this place where you can actually make a nice kind of featured landscape within what would otherwise just be an ordinary roundabout. I always think there's a lot of potential for that, and I wish more places would do it. So thanks for sending that one in, Jim. Right, okay, so do that. Where have we now? There we go. I can do that, and I can flip back and see what we've got here. Oh, Shashi's arrived and says hello. Hi, Shashi. Glad you could make it. Okay, Stacey's caught up now as far as the railroad thing, and Jim says thanks for the constructive comments. Right, good. I'm glad you found them useful. Right. Okay. So next, then, let's move on to Marcus. Now, this is Marcus's first picture that he's put in, and I have to say, well impressed. This I feel smug points all around. So Marcus says this one was taken coming back from Granton-on-Spey last winter. So a little bit further up the road than Brian was on the A9, a little bit further north in Scotland. The story behind this is the fact that last winter we had a lot of snow, which made driving conditions very edgy. It was almost a race to get back to the coast before more snow fell, which in my own mind wondered whether I would make it home or not, being on the edge of the Cairngorms, which is a beautiful mountainous region in Scotland. So this picture depicts a journey of beauty, yet with apprehension. So first of all, I mean, I think it's beautifully lit. You've got soft, you know, the white. We've got all the texture in the trees and we've got shades of the white and the blue and almost kind of yellowish hint into the, where a little bit of soft sunlight or daylight is brighter over here. We've got a slightly bluer deep depth of the shadows there, and the road just leads us through it. Now, I suppose to go back to what I was saying about April's photo, let me just pull up April's photo again. Remember when I said to you, April, that the road is turning to the right? In some ways not massively dissimilar, except for the fact that you don't really have anything on the right, so it feels like everything's to the left. Whereas when we take a look at this one, you see there is more over on the right here, and these bushes and trees and a bit of embankment and the tree here, which the road is then disappearing around behind, I think balances. So we really do get a sense of that road leading us into the picture of the beautiful trees. Now, I must admit, I looked at the picture and I thought, oh, snow, how much fun. I must admit, when you then turn around and said, and you're driving on it, and of course, why wouldn't you be? Because here are tyre tracks. That then suddenly made me go, oh, right, okay, now I understand the apprehension with that. Because if I was driving either up or down that, and you've not got a four-wheel drive, it's absolutely terrifying. Fine for you people in Canada, or I don't know, Robert, maybe you got used to it in Texas the winter past. For those of you who live in snowy northern climes and are used to driving on snow, or have the the fancy 4x4s, that's fine. But for those of us who aren't really used to driving on snow, it's a terrifying prospect. You go one bit wrong, the car's going to be slammed into a tree, nasty dents, car might even be a write-off, or certainly there's going to be a big bill for fixing it. So yeah, I can absolutely understand the apprehension with that. So it is that interesting combination of, as you say, apprehension and absolute beauty. So yeah, smug points there, Marcus, for your first entry into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres podcast. I'm really, really impressed with that one. I'd have been more than happy if I'd taken that one myself, for sure. So thank you for sending that one in. Okay, yeah, we got lots of comments here. Jackie says, wow, that's beautiful. Vandana says, snow, snow, lovely snow. Jim says, beautiful picture. Sandra, lovely snow. April admits that it's pretty. Vici says, like a fairy tale with the fresh snow. Michelle really loves the photo. Maggie says, glorious winter. You can smell the cold. That's true. April says, the balance element makes sense. That's good. Russ, oh, beautiful image, very aesthetically pleasing. And Megan says, snow is easy to drive if you remember slower is better. Okay, yes, I think, no, for sure, you're right. I think the main thing I seem to remember when I've driven on snow is it's about not making any sudden movements. Everything you have to do is very slow and gentle, and not suddenly turning the wheel, suddenly hitting the accelerator, suddenly hitting the brake. Those are the things that are just going to have you skidding and sliding all over the place. And that's fine, as long as there's nobody else on the road. The problem comes when either an animal bolts out in front of you or another car is suddenly coming and you have to react. That's where it gets absolutely terrifying. Cool, right, what are we on to next? Next we're going to go on to, oh yeah, Nuria says, and fitting tyre chains. Yeah, that would certainly help. In fact, okay, Nuria, you're up next then, and with another little bit of snow. Not snow on the road, but snow in the mountains on the opposite side of the world. Nuria was down in New Zealand. Very dramatic. Land of Mordor and Lord of the Rings. So Nuria says, I took this photo on the road to the mountains near Porter's Pass, Christchurch to Arthur's Pass, South Island, New Zealand. Wish I could visit again. This was taken in 2013. Absolutely. So it does look really dramatic. You've got the snow on the mountains. You've got this cloud which is below the mountains but sneaking across the hills in the front. The thing that strikes me, though, the first thing that strikes me is it's very dark. And whilst there is a road in here, it's not particularly clear or lighting us up. Our attention is getting drawn completely to the mountains along here because that's the brightest part of the image, and everything else I feel is just a little bit too dark. Excuse me. Okay, let's just close that one of Jim's there. And excuse me. I mean, quite simply, even if I just took the levels and drag them up a bit there, that helps a little bit. Let's take it into Camera Raw, play around with it a little bit more. So let's open it here, and if I take the shadows, bring them up a bit, and let's take the exposure up, so we can take it like that, bring the shadows up a little bit, take the highlights down a little bit so that the sky doesn't become quite so dominant. But you can see here now that we can now make out much more, and then perhaps even if I grab the clarity tool and drag that a little bit, yes, you see now we're getting a little bit more drama in the clouds, and we're getting more, and that road, see how much more the road leaps out, because where we're getting that contrast into it. Now we've got something like that. It's a dramatic sky, but it's not really about the sky, so I think you could probably even drag the sky down a little bit more like that, and then have the rather than the top of the mountain being in the everything above the mountains being in that top third, actually take the top of this dark a bit, and so the top of the mountains are all in that upper third, and then that way you've kind of got a division of, you've got the mountains in the top part, you've got the road in the bottom part, and then you've got this hill with this lovely line of cloud running through the middle part. So a slightly more cinematic, dramatic landscape side of things I think works better. Now the road kind of starts to draw us here. There's a little bit of a bend at the end here which pulls our eye back in towards the mountains, which works, except for the fact that it then goes down and pulls away a bit. So a little bit slightly less certain about the road and how it's working. I kind of feel like I want more road. And there is a little bit here whereby, is there any way you could have got higher up? It may well not be, you've just parked by the side of the road, but it's that bit, if you could sort of climb up the hill that you're obviously coming down a little bit more, get a little bit more height to look down on the road. The other thing is, something worth pointing out here to anybody who's ever trying to take a photo of mountains in the distance or something high up, is it's always good if you can drop down and go up. So this works particularly well with the mountains because she's already high, and then the road slopes down and then the mountains go up. That becomes a really important part. If you're actually at ground level and then looking up at the mountains, somehow they never quite seem as high as they do if you're already up and it goes down and then goes up. So that works really well, Nuria. So, but just apart, so that idea of just a little bit more height with the when taking the road looking down, I think would have make a bit more of a feature of the road taking you into the mountains. You've kind of got it there, but I think you need to kind of, to maximise this photo, you need to ramp it up a little bit. But the big thing as well is that notion of lightening it and creating a bit more contrast, because if we go back now to your original photo like this, it just feels very dark and you're kind of struggling to see what else is there. Whereas when you've got the detail and that contrast there, you've still got all the drama of the mountains, you've lost none of that, but we've now got the road working more in your favour and more to explore in the landscape. So, hope that helps, Nuria. Right, okay, where are we? So, Nuria says, it was winter and very dark. Okay, April says, this is awesome. Megan loves the photo. Angela says, it's beautiful. Sandra says, moody and dramatic. Russ says, stunning. I think I would try and lighten the road as the middle is almost lost in the murk. And it looks like, once again, Russ was probably typing just seconds before I actually started making those very adjustments. Oh, yes, he then goes on to say, you did it again. Vandana really likes the edit. Nuria says she likes the edit. Roy says, stand on top of the car. Funnily enough, I said that to Maggie earlier, but having said that, most modern built cars won't really take the weight of a full-grown adult on the top without leaving us some nasty dents and scratches in the top. Of course, if you've got a nice Land Rover, long wheelbase Land Rover with one of those big kind of metal roof rack type things, then you could get away with it. Jim says, the edit in the crop makes all the difference. Vici says, great photo, even better after the editing. And Nuria says, thank you. Cool. Excellent. Right. So, we're halfway. Maybe, no, I think we're probably more than halfway through now. Yeah, we're definitely over halfway. So just a quick reminder, actually, in fact, if you are finding these podcasts really useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is the place to do it. Always appreciated. Right, oh, Nuria says, should have climbed on top of the camper van. Well, if it's a camper van, you could definitely have done that. So let's move on now. So next up we have Paul, and Paul was on Skye at a place with a Q in it, and lots of vowels, and if I attempt to pronounce it, I'm just going to show my absolute ignorance. No, I'm not even going to attempt it. So this is a view from Skye, which is one of the major islands off the west coast of Scotland. So very dramatic, beautiful, incredible landscapes. If you're a landscape photographer, you get up there and you're never going to be disappointed. There's always interesting crags and everything. This view I recognise. I've definitely driven up or down this road. It also has a really familiar look to... I can't find it. I was trying to look for it earlier, couldn't find it, but I would swear somebody put a black and white version of this in last year to one of the critique sections. Anyway, doesn't really matter. So Paul says, this is a magical place. We're not too busy. I like the curve in the road with the far landscape also catching the eye. Now, we do have some very dramatic far off landscape. You see, you go past the hills and then it's more islands in the distance, probably a little bit of built up area, small village or hamlet or something over there. There's rivers, or not rivers, there's inlets and little small lakes or lochs, and this dramatic bit of hill coming down the side here. So great place, nicely edited. We've got all the texture in the sky, we've got the fading back, we've got the detail in the cliffs and the rocks here. I would say my only problem with this, Paul, is I tend to feel it becomes almost a photo of two halves, because the road, once again, the road is what this is. It was the road challenge. And the road, whilst you've got all this fantastic landscape over in the background, the road isn't leading us to it. The road is curling us back in. So if we're going down the hill, okay, let me open this in Photoshop again, just to kind of close the ears there. And so again, if we do the kind of leading lines, if we're going down the hill, the road pulls our eye down this way. If we're coming up the hill, the road pulls us back into this way. So the road is acting like a leading line, but it's either taking us that way or it's bringing us this way. And either way is keeping us down here. All this stuff, your dramatic sky, your dramatic background, your dramatic hills, your dramatic lochs, isn't where the eye is getting drawn to. When we consider the fact that really, I think what you're trying to get with this is a sense of the drama of Skye with the roads, with the hills, and then with the landscape in the distance, all those islands and the texture of the clouds and the mountains. In a way, your road is working against you, because your road is pulling your eye back down to the bottom of the photo. And what we can see is, if I just briefly kind of crop this in half almost, if we have a photo like that, now you can see the photo is all about the drama and the landscape. We've got all these mountains in the foreground, and then we've got these fantastic mountain and sea and sky in the background. That then becomes one dramatic photo. Alternatively, if we take this and we bring it down to here, now this road is all about the road. This is a different photo. Maybe I cropped it a little bit too early, should have taken up or down a little bit. Doesn't really matter. So now this is a separate photo. This is a photo about the steep, wiggly, windy, single track road. That's obviously coming up through the mountains. And we've got a nice contrast between the camper van coming down the hill, the little car coming up the hill, gives us a sense of scale. this is almost heart-shaped around here as well, this triangle, which is then keeping you contained within this part. So in essence, I think the major problem that we have here, Paul, is the idea that it becomes two photos in one, but they're not complementing each other. They're not. It's not one of them leading you into the other, or it's one of them cuts you off from the other. So dramatic place, fantastic place, and of course there's so many places on Sky, and I bet you have thousands of folders full of amazing images in there. This particular one, though, for the road challenge, I think is actually working slightly against you in terms of composition, but I hope what I've explained makes sense. But thanks very much for sending that in. It was lovely to see that bit of it. I definitely recognise it. I don't think I have any decent photos of it. I'm not going to attempt to say that I have. But in terms of just kind of creating the composition, but it's lovely to see that part again, and it does set me off wanting to get back to Sky at some point soon for sure. So thank you very much for sending that one in, Paul. Right, what else have we got here? Oh, Russ is saying, why did you tell Maggie to get on the roof of the car? Yeah, I'm sure she would love me for that. Okay, so April says, this is beautiful. Nuria, beautiful landscape. Sandra says, stunning. Vandana, so beautiful, rugged, and yet peaceful. VG would love to get there. Stacey's now commenting on circles in PA, in Pennsylvania, in certain areas now starting to change. Would that be the roundabouts? Not sure. Again, I think Stacey's still 15 minutes behind the rest of us. Inga says so many interesting layers. Vandana says the heart-shaped road after the crop looks beautiful. Okay, Sandra, that's what we're going on to next. So Sandra was on holiday last week, so wasn't doing the photo challenge. So she's gone back and raided the archives. And Sandra pulled in this one and says, well, I was on a holiday. Yeah, so I raided the back catalogue for this challenge, which was taken from inside a coach while on a trip to the Austrian Alps. Wow, what a dramatic. So everything I said before about the idea of looking down before you look up, that's got this effect here. So we've got the massive, the sense of the scale of these mountains really comes out of it. However, there is a thing here where I would say almost identical to what we were talking to Paul just now, is this ends up being a photo of two halves. The road, see, it is an amazing road here. Those alpine roads. Now, while I've not been to Austria, I have been to Switzerland and even the Italian Alps, and the roads just wiggle and wind and go through the mountains, and you can spend an hour driving backwards and forwards just to get to the top of the pass, and then another hour to get down to the valley below. They are amazing. They are beautiful. They really mess up, better use a higher car, because your brakes and your gears will be shot by the end of it. But the problem is here, whilst here you do get a sense of the wiggly road. When faced with the whole picture, they almost disappear. You're not really getting quite such a sense of the road. Everything is drawing you up to these mountains. You've got the valley, you've got the curve of the valley here in the foreground, and everything, and you've got this really dramatic kind of glacial remains of the snow and ice here, which is a really strong line, and everything, and the clouds, everything's drawing you up to the top part of it, and so the bottom part's getting missed. So yes, absolutely, it's a dramatic photo, but to come back to that notion of the road challenge, and I think we're talking about the fact that it's not really about the road. It's about, so again, you could just as easily kind of crop it there, and it's all about the mountain, and then this little building sitting on the edge, or you could take it down. Now, if you take it to something like that, maybe we don't need quite as much on that side, and we crop it like that. Now, do you see? This then is all about the road. Okay, that you've now got the wiggle of the road, and you've got the building and the car park and the beauty spot, the viewpoint from there. But you have got all these wonderful curves in the road. But in order to get that, you've got to concentrate on the road rather than the view. because the line of this road is not taking you into the view. It just seems to be sitting at the bottom. The view is already going wham and hitting you, but the road isn't taking you into it. The road is getting lost in this. So, lovely dramatic photo, but for the road challenge as such, I think doesn't quite fit. If we've been talking the mountain challenge, this would have scored you the smug points. So, hope that gives you a little bit of thought and insight there, Sandra. So thanks for sending that one in. So let's close that and come back to comments. Right, okay, so April says, wow. Roy says, okay now. VG says, wow. Inga likes it. Russ says, beautiful, very James Bond-like landscape. Yeah, I kind of thought that a bit as well. It's true. Nuria says, brilliant shot. Roy says, dramatic. Stacey's now talking about SUV as a necessity here in the winter, but the ice doesn't work. So, okay, Stacey being about 15 minutes behind. Jim likes the picture as a whole. So much in it. And Stacey's saying beautiful though, but I'm not sure which picture she's referring to. Probably the snow. Right, okay, let's move on to Sophie. Now, Sophie, where are we? Was the Road to the Mountains, and she says, I took these on the move when we drove through the Torres del Paine National Park in Chile. Torre del Paine. No, I haven't a clue. I just don't know how to pronounce any of these places, so my deep apologies for that. Anyway, it's a national park in Chile. So that's presumably the Andes we're kind of looking at here, isn't it? It's not perfect, but hopefully shows the winding road and the atmosphere. So here what we do have is we do have the road leading through the valley into the mountains. It's dropping down. You can feel it kind of going up and then over, and then it just sort of disappears over this bit and then drops and then comes, but then we get sent into the mountains beyond. So this is much more. So I think we're kind of into the smug points here for the road leading you into the story. My kind of problem here with this is I tend to feel that that blue looks too blue. That yellow looks slightly too yellow. I think this is another one of these where in the editing, it's the vibrance as bit slider has been taken up just a little bit too much. If I go to vibrance here, I just want to nudge that down a little bit. Do you see? Now, not all the way, because that kind of makes it almost nudge it up too much. But if I take that down by about 40%, well, maybe not quite, maybe sort of 30 or something like that, I think that just works a bit better from that to that. Because otherwise it's feeling just a little bit too overcooked. So I'd certainly do that. And then actually I would say that crop, I just want to kind of make it a little bit more dramatic. Let's just pull this up. We don't want to lose that sense of the drop in the road, but just a little bit more like that. And now again, perhaps potentially that road is slightly too central. I think if you'd shifted everything over to the left a little bit more, crop content, yeah, great, I've got it. So let's just nudge that slightly sideways like that, crop off a little bit of this, add a little bit more in on the left, and I think that off-center road creates it a little bit more interesting. And you got, but that aside, I think it's a great shot. You know, the road is leading you through the picture and delivering to interesting landscape beyond. So yeah, you get your smug point for that. Right, okay, so next, let's just double check if we got any comments. Yep, got a couple more here. Where are we? Sandra says thank you for all the lovely comments, and Kim for the feedback on the cropping for that photo. Cool. Inga says, here we talk road. April says she likes the balance. Fiji says perfect. Jackie says lovely image. Sophie. April says, I must remember the concept of balance and oversaturation on all my photos. Yeah, that's true. It's the same thing we talked about with you, April, was that slight oversaturation. You're not the only one. Robert did the same thing as well. I think part of it sometimes comes out of, if you are used to seeing most of your photos on these competition sites, whether it's PhotoCrowd or ViewBug or Guru Shots, that when you're in a situation whereby people are zooming through hundreds of photos a minute, what tends to happen is the ones that are oversaturated, the ones that are brighter, more garish, tend to grab the attention a bit more. And that's fine in that situation, but it does mean, but if you're looking at a photo on its own, it suddenly becomes too loud. In amongst a whole bunch of others, it probably, you can kind of get away with it. And the other thing is, if you see a lot of people doing that, you then start to normalize it and kind of feel that actually that oversaturated look is what's acceptable. And it might be sort of acceptable, though I would still maybe argue the point, in these kind of online competition things where you're looking at hundreds of photos in a very short space of time. But I think if you're looking at the idea of a photo as in, you were going to frame it, you're going to put it on a wall, you're going to put it in a gallery, you were going to even have it as background wallpaper, as a standalone image, not being crowded in by other things, then you've really got to watch the oversaturation, the overcooking of the photo. Right, okay, what else have we got here? Vandana says saturation just makes everything so dramatic that it misleads. Inga agrees, loves the more off-centre of the cropping, and Sandra loves the photos. Cool, okay, excellent. So now we'll move on to Stacey, and Stacey will probably catch up with us in about 15 minutes. So Stacey says, for the road challenge, this week I went to Van Sant Airport with my photography club to take photos of some really old airplanes. I had to drive in a very rural area of Pennsylvania called Irwina. Lots of old churches and little dark off-roads like what I photographed here. On each side is an old cemetery. The black gate has not been maintained, but it makes the area look nostalgic. Sorry, should have flipped over to tell you just to show you what I was talking about. Now, I think here, first of all, we have a road that does lead us straight into a photo. But I think what's happened here is you've fallen into the same kind of trap that we've talked about earlier this evening. So essentially, you've got this strong leading line taking you right through to the end of the photo, takes us right to the end over here, but there's nothing here to deliver. Where are we going? We're just disappearing into the trees. Now, what you talk about in your write-up is things like the old churches and the gate and the old cemetery, which is here. And here we can see the gravestones in the background, and we've got this lovely ironwork gate. You said it's either side of the road. If I look over here, there's a little gravestone hidden behind the tree there. But it's not really obvious. If this over on the right is really what was grabbing your attention, the problem is that the road is taking us straight past it. Those leading lines are taking us straight down to the middle of the photo in the distance, but there isn't anything there. Now, if you'd sort of gone down that line and then there was a fancy old Gothic church at the end of it, or even a graveyard or an entrance to a graveyard, and then the road led you to that entrance, then I think the road is really doing the job that you want it to. But here, you've got a road that's disappearing to a place which isn't really delivering, because what's delivering is to one side of the road, but the line is taking us past it. So I hope that kind of makes sense, Stacey, in terms of the composition. It's you're not alone with this. It's one of those themes that we've kind of been running along quite a bit this evening. Right. April says, my husband comes from Pennsylvania. So many great places to visit and a great photo state. Now, by contrast then, let's head over to Megan's photo. So Megan says, I wanted this shot to show just how long the road went, along with how large the stormy clouds were. And this then is, so I think you can kind of have a smug point here, because there is a little bit more of the fact that we have the road and it's taking us along, and it is, as we get to this part of the road, it drops down, there's more road, there's a gap in the trees, it's taking us along. Now, there aren't mountains in the distance, which as we had with the photo from Chile, but there is this rather dramatic sky. So I think, and they certainly get that sort of sense of rural softness It's got wet roads here, got the softness of the grass over here, rather nice building up on the left there, and down here as well. These outer buildings and barns and bits and pieces. I think the sky is quite big, dramatic. There's a bit whereby I almost want that sky to be more dramatic, really. I think as you've got the road leading you to it, I don't know what it might have been like slightly earlier, slightly later, but let's just for the moment, well, first of all, let's shove a vignette in, because I want to darken down those kind of clouds at the top here. And then if we take that clarity slider and drag it over to the right, then you end up with a much slightly more dramatic sky. Whether you want to play in black and white or desaturated even a little bit becomes slightly more interesting, I think, because again there's a little sense of the colours being slightly overcooked here. Now, having done that, I think that works better for the sky, but we've lost some of the foreground, so I'll mask that. Let's just pull back the brush tool here and bring back in the foreground, something like that, and in that way I think now the sky just becomes that little bit more dramatic and the road is leading us through to it. If you wanted a little bit of that slight desaturation, maybe take that down to 30%. Oh, sorry, not there, on the mask. Turn it white, that is, and then just pull a little bit of that in, but not too much. So I think that then becomes a sort of bit more of a dramatic photo there. Another option with this is, if you weren't having so much of the sky, I think it's a really interesting, because I like the foreground here. There's part of me, it's an alternative crop, not necessarily one you have to have. But if you take that down into here and make it this sort of slightly more cinematic kind of crop, something like this. So we've got the edge of the road going right into the corner over here. And then we take this down, so we've got that kind of, again, thirds, so the sky is in the top third, got this main bit of road in the bottom, and then we've got these buildings and this kind of action happening in the middle of it, like that. You see, now that there becomes a very cinematic, really, sense, and the central, and the road being in the middle kind of works with that cinematic sense, I think, as well. So maybe, or maybe you could even crop in a little bit there, maybe take it slightly off center. Yeah, in fact, actually that kind of works as well, where this is now running up the thirds like that. And I think that becomes an interesting, so we've still got sky, we've still got bits of interesting here, bits of stuff up there. So alternative crop to play around with, or there's the idea of playing around and making a sort of slightly more dramatic sky as well. So those are ideas. Thank you very much for sending that one in, Megan. Hope you get something out of that. Cool. Right, where are we? So just a couple more left to go. Where are we? A couple more here. April loves the water on the road. Vandana says it looks like a painting. Sandra says it's a great dramatic photo. VG loves the cloud. Vandana saying, could have had a cloud challenge. Maybe we do that one at some point. And April seems to like the edit too. Cool, excellent. Right, okay, so now we'll move on to Vandana. And Vandana says, a view on Regent Street. Road in the city with arches overhead. It's a bit skewed. I did try straightening but was not able to. Any other critique is welcome, well, other than the fact that it's not straight. Okay, so there is that. We've got arches, and we've got an arch within an arch, which is quite fun. So we've got the sort of foreground arch here, then we've got a midground arch here, we've got buildings, we've got people, we've got lines, we've got road, we've got people walking up it, we've got arrows on the roads and lines. So potentially it has everything we want. It's a good road challenge photo. But I'm afraid, Vandana, you can't kind of say, well, I couldn't get it straight. And so now there's also a couple of odd bits down here. Like if we look over here, the yellow lines come down and then suddenly leap across, and there's odd bits of lines here. So this looks like you've been trying to use some kind of auto content fill or add something or take something out, and I don't know quite what it is you've done there. It might have been quite interesting if you sent me the original photo. But I think the thing here is, Vandana, is you've got the potential. I think you've got the eye. You've noticed that there's an arch within an arch, that there's lines drawing you into the photo. And this just becomes one of those things whereby there's a limit to what you can correct afterwards, especially if you're only operating with a phone. But even with Photoshop, I would be struggling with something like this. And what you want to try and do is get the best source material you can. So when you are taking the photo, make sure the horizon is straight. Make sure the verticals are vertical and it's not tilted. And again, it's that kind of what I was saying earlier, turning around and saying, well, this is the best I could do with what I've got, is okay, and that's fine for you learning from that, but nobody else cares. Nobody else, if you put this in for a competition, people are just going to go, oh, it's a bit skewed, and look straight past it. When we get to editing, what we're trying to do, we want the best possible material we have before we even get to the editing stage. So when you're taking the photo, it is about, yes, there's two aspects of it. There's the and your creative side. I'm very impressed that you've got a very strong creative eye, Vandana. And your creative eye is noticing this arch within the arch. The fact that it's lighter, the other side of the arch, draws our attention straight through it as well. Although the foreground is a bit too dark, and I would certainly have recommended lightening it up a bit. Again, if I just open that with Photoshop for a moment. And now, if I've got content aware and just straighten that up a little bit like that, maybe don't need quite as much at the bottom, just to try and take care of. That's maybe gone a little bit too far. Something like that. Enter. And hopefully we'll just fill in. Yeah, so we've got something like that. Automatically fits a bit better. But what I think you also need to do is this foreground is just a bit too dark. So if I go to Camera Raw, and what I might do actually is add a bit of a vignette to kind of darken down this little bit of road at the bottom, which isn't necessarily doing so much for us. Something like that pulls our attention into, but the main bit being we need to take the shadows and boost the shadows up a bit so we can get that, and maybe take the clarity. Yeah, so now if we do that, we're getting much more in the way of the foreground, the texture of the foreground, the arches that are coming out here. And in fact, what we notice now, which I didn't overly notice in the first time, here this is just a dark shadow, but now we can actually see there's detail within the other side of the arch. So we've kind of got three arches going on, taking us through to here. And I think that becomes a much more interesting photo. So try and get it straight when you're taking the photo. The technicals do matter. Get the horizon line straight, or get the vertical lampposts or sides of the buildings straight. Try and use your leading lines and rule of thirds, and then you add those technicals into the creative eye that you've got, and you end up with a much more impressive picture. And then I think something like this, where we've now got the detail in the bridge, we've got the successive arches, we've got the road that draws us through the arches, and we've even got some interesting buildings and stuff going on beyond that. I think this then does become a good entry into a road challenge, and this point is the bit where you get the smug points. So half a smug point for getting it, but your technicalities have let you down, which you know, but it's just a case of kind of reinforcing that so that next time you go out and you spot something like this, just think, right, okay, maybe you've only got the phone that you're using, but line it up as best as you can. So hope that helps. Okay, so what were we saying there? Where are we? So, all right, okay. Rust like the last crop highlight, which highlight the road but includes the interest on the left. Yeah, so where on Megan's thing, on Megan's photo, where yeah, it made the road a little bit more rule of thirds. Megan says, "Thank you, Kim. Always helpful, and a cloud challenge would be fun." Russ says there's not something quite right with both sides. Stacey's talking about mountains in the background, so she's still further back. VG says you could try landscape and then crop, and you will have more room to edit, Vandana. So Yeah, so VG's suggesting that actually you take it across the way rather than up the way. And without really knowing what else, it's difficult to know where that would have been. Okay, VG says, where is this? I think Vandana said Regent Street, which is in London, in England. Okay, and Vandana says, thank you. Cool. Right, so we're going to move on to the last photo, and then I'll tell you what I'm going to be talking about next week. And oh, Robert also says plus one on the cloud challenge. He would like a cloud challenge too. Right. Okay. I will consider a cloud challenge, not next week. Not there might be a few weeks ahead yet, but I will take that into consideration. Right, so our last photo then, the one I thought I would finish with, is from Nicola. So you see, we weren't completely in alphabetical order. And I will say this one because I think Nicola deserves smug points for this one. I love this photo. This photo does everything for me that a nice road challenge photo should do. Nicola says, "Hi Kim, I took this photo a few years ago, but always liked the way the road takes you on a journey along it. It is effectively round the bend and beyond. Quality-wise, it's not the best and was taken on a phone camera, but I thought it's still worthy content for the subject itself. Thank you for the opportunity to join in the challenge." So what we have here works on several levels on a compositional level. Yeah, technically, if I zoom in on this, and this wouldn't print out. So it's great as a web photo, but it is a phone photo. There isn't as much detail in there as you would like if you were going to. So it's not a printable photo, but for a web photo, it's rather lovely. You've got the road going up on the right, so you have that kind of nice rule of thirds. You've got the horizon isn't dead center. Again, you've got a little bit. But the way the road curves at the end here helps to bring your eye back round to the road to the sun. The sun setting behind the tree, silhouetted, all the texture and all the colours, that deep colours in the sky. But it's not so silhouetted that we've lost the road. The road is still balancing out the picture. Potentially slightly overcooked again, but it's difficult to tell because you do get a lot of rich colours in the sunset. And a photo like this, you want the rich colours in the sky. But I think the fact that we've got the colours, we've got, obviously the bright sun part is the bit that draws our eye. But the road is complementing it. That's the real thing with this. The road, if that road was turning to the right rather than to the left at the end, it would have taken us away and we would have had those problems that some of the other things we've talked about where the road is taking you out of the picture. But this one, the road is bringing you into the picture. And we have more we've got texture in the background, we've got texture in the off to the side, we've got the sunlight, we've got the colours. So this is where I think it tends to balance that much better. So, smug points to you, Nicola, and I think a great way to end off the photos for the challenge. So, thank you ever so much to everybody who sent in photos. So, a couple more comments here. Jackie says, fantastic image. April says, very pretty. Sandra, lovely photo. VG, feels like the road leads to the sun. Lovely. And Roy says, it's like going home at the end of the day. And it certainly is. So, that is a good one to finish on. So thank you ever so much to everybody who has joined in. Next week, now, interestingly, what happened was not this weekend, done weekend before and a bit from it. I've been out at a wetland trust doing photos for an artist called Jeff Forrest. I don't know how many who are likely to remember it. Last year, I did a little bit on one of the sessions I did. I talked about these steel hair. So, hair as in like a rabbit, not hair on your head. Steel hairs that I'd photographed for Jeff Forrest with the sun setting behind it. On the back of that photo, or certainly the photo supported, he's currently got an exhibition of these statues. As well as the hair, he's got dragonfly, some geese, curlews, an otter, created in the same kind of steel sculptures out at the Calaverick Wildlife and Wetland Trust, which is about 25 miles from here. Lovely part of the wetlands down on the south coast of Scotland, and there's a place where you can go, and these sculptures have been placed on a trail. You can go on a kind of sculpture trail. Lovely place. Anyway, Jeff then wanted me to photograph them in situ, which caused all sorts of nightmares for me and difficulty trying to work out, but I've succeeded, and I showed him the photos just a weekend past. He's delighted with them. The sculpture trail is there until the end of August for anybody who happens to be locally enough to go and visit it. So I thought I would probably show you some of the photos next week and talk about some of the challenges I had in order to get those photos and how we overcame them. So but there will also be a critique section. So I've already got 2 photos in for critique already, because Vandana put in something and Roberts sent me an image for critique, because I think they forgot that this week wasn't a critique one particularly. So we're already kind of ahead of the game. So if you're wanting to get images in for the critique for next week, kind of get them in quickly. So that's what I'm going to be dealing with next week. If you found these podcasts useful and you would like to support them, 2 ways you can do it. One, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is always a good support. Another way, invite your friends, tell other people about these podcasts, and let's grow the community. So thank you once again to everybody who has sent in an image for the road challenge, and to everybody who's taken the time to comment and feedback. And my apologies for back at the beginning when there was the absolute chaos with me starting and having to restart the podcast. Hopefully I'll get that all sorted out for next week, and so I'll see you next Tuesday. Meanwhile, if you've not already done so, go to the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group and start sticking your images in for the next podcast for critique. Right. Cheerio. Lovely to see you all. Let me just or to chat to you, and cheerio. Bye bye.